Welcome back. Well, the agreement to form a coalition government in Pakistan goes back to 2006 with the signing of the Charter for Democracy. The document, signed by Mr. Sharif, an assassinated former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, sought to remove President Musharraf from power by bringing an end to military rule. In particular, the Charter aimed to reduce Musharraf's powers while strengthening their own hands. While the Charter wants the Prime Minister to appoint the head of the armed forces instead of the President, it also seeks to expand Parliament's own powers. For their part, Sharif and the Pakistan People's Party insist the country will only ever progress when these changes are made. And we're still joined by our guests. In Islamabad, spokesman of the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz Party, Ahsan Iqbal, and in London, Maria Kusisto, Pakistan expert and research analyst at Eurasia Group's Asia practice. And on the line from Islamabad, former Information Minister and Pakistan Muslim League Q leader, Senator Tariq Azim Khan. Thank you all for being with us. If we could start again with Maria, really to enforce the Charter on Democracy, they need to undo all the constitutional amendments that Musharraf made last year. Can they do it?
Well, it is going to be a very, very long process, and unlike the reinstatement of the judges, these changes will need to be with two-thirds majority in the National Assembly, and particularly in the both houses of the National Assembly. So I expect that the two parties are going to face a long process and perhaps some challenges trying to implement this agenda, which is actually, fairly thorough and very, very wide-ranging pro-democracy agenda.
It's a wide-ranging agenda. Ahsan Iqbal, how much agreement is there when it comes to perhaps other issues like fighting armed groups in the country? The PMLN has talked about negotiating, talking with armed groups. Benazir Bhutto in her days had a much harder line.
Well, I think, first of all, let me say that now everybody agrees that this issue of terrorism has been mishandled by General Musharraf, who used it as a political tool in order to perpetuate his rule. And he has also been carrying out some indiscriminate military actions. As a result, thousands of civilians have become casualties, which has opened new fault lines in Pakistani society, particularly in the tribal areas. And it has made the whole issue very complex. So now we need to have an internal debate and consensus, and need to have a national strategy on fighting terrorism, which also includes political strategy as well as economic, social aspects and dimensions to this strategy. General Musharraf has largely used a military strategy, which has proven to be very counterproductive. There has been no breakthrough in fighting terrorism or extremism. As a matter of fact, in last several years, we have seen much more deterioration in terms of fighting terrorism, and this problem is now penetrating into other areas, settled areas of Pakistan, in shape of suicidal bombs. So now we plan to have a debate in the parliament, in the new parliament, and what we argue and believe that we also need to include political dialogue with different groups. We need to have social, economic aspects. It's a complex issue, but just trying to fight a battle of political ideas with guns and gunship helicopters is not going to be very productive. It has proven to be very counterproductive.
All right, Tariq Azim Khan, listening there to what Ahsan Iqbal was saying, do you think that the US is going to read this as not good news, that the civilian government is perhaps softer on fighting armed groups, and will that push the US into a stronger alliance with President Musharraf?
Yeah, before I come to that, could you please allow me to correct one impression that was created by my friend Ahsan Iqbal. The party, our party and our allies were not routed at all. I mean, the People's Party got 10.4 million votes and we got 8 million and PMLN got about 7 million. Even in the stronghold of Mian Nawaz Sahib in Punjab, they got 5.4, whereas we got 5.8. We got more votes than PMLN, although we got lesser seats. So I want to get the perspective right. You see, it's argued, that when they get into power, they'll do things differently, but they haven't described how differently they're going to do it, how they're going to handle this menace of terrorism that is a worldwide phenomena. He said they're going to have political debate in the parliament. Well, we've been having political debate in the parliament for the last 2-3 years, and yet the terrorism has not gone away.
How about opening talks with some of these armed groups?
Certainly. certainly, if you remember, on the 5th of September 2006, there was an agreement which was, in fact, very widely criticized at that time by some American politicians that we should not be talking to the Taliban. Yes, we did that. There was a carrot and stick policy. We used both, talking to them. At the same time, if it did not get through talks and dialogue, then, of course, the force had to be used, but that was always used as a last resort. But it will be, interesting to see exactly what policy they adopt.
All right.
There has not been any clear at all, exactly what policy they're talking about.
Well, since Mr. Ahsan Iqbal is still with us, let's take that point straight back to him. What is new in any of the approaches that you've been outlining?
As I said, I was telling you before that they had totally excluded the political option, political process. For example, in the tribal areas, the political process has not been allowed to function. Political parties have not been allowed to operate. So
but
that
haven't they held talks? Correct me if I'm wrong, the government has held talks and even signed agreements with some of the tribes.
But government has never allowed political parties to operate in the tribal areas. And I think we need to allow mainstream democratic parties to go out, reach out to these tribal areas, bring them into their fold so that they can be brought into the national mainstream. So what I mean is that this political option was never tried to full because General Musharraf could only survive by selling a military option, being a military dictator. He has always over-relied on military option, which has proven to be very counterproductive, which has opened new fault lines in Pakistani society. So now we need to really tackle this issue, which has been made very complicated, very complex, and the political democratic party is going to inherit a Pakistan whose internal fiber has been greatly fractured by the wrong policies of General Musharraf. But now we strongly believe that when General Musharraf resigns or quits, that will be one major breakthrough to try to solve this terrorism problem, because he has become such a symbol of hatred inside Pakistan for all groups that his presence becomes a rallying point for many extremist and jihadi troops to give up, to take on their jihadi route much stronger with greater motivation. So one of the breakthroughs we might have is his stepping down, which can give some space.
Okay, got the point. Let's go over to Maria Kusisto. The departure of Musharraf, would that make a huge difference to the internal struggle in Pakistan?
Well, I think what will make a difference, I think that all of these elements that the two gentlemen have mentioned have been tried and tested in Pakistan over the past 5-6 years that we've seen very, very strong militant activity. But I think the difference is that the Pakistan People's Party and the Pakistan Muslim League N have now a very strong popular mandate to actually tackle the insurgency in the tribal areas and also the terrorism outside these areas. Majority of Pakistanis voted for liberal secular Pakistan, liberal secular parties, and I think this will make a difference. They have a lot stronger mandate to go and start implementing economic development, military operations when needed, and also dialogue with some of the pro-establishment elements of the tribals. Do we know that
for sure when, as we're hearing from the PMLN, they're talking about negotiating rather than fighting? How can we make that assumption that people have voted because they want to see a tougher line, a liberal secular democracy battling these armed elements?
Let me clarify if I could.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, you see, what I'm saying is that in last 5-6 years, what we have seen that there has been over-reliance on military options with the political, economic, social options not being used significantly. Military option has to be the last resort. We are not excluding the military option, but what we are saying, first we have to exhaust the political, economic, social options and then resort to military option as a last resort.
All right, we are getting short on time, but before we wrap things up, I want to pose a question once again to Tariq Azim Khan. Looking at some of the things that have been proposed in the Charter for Democracy, bringing the army more under the control of perhaps the Prime Minister rather than the President, how do you think the army might react to that sort of role?
I think, this is all pre-poll posturing by the political parties. So, I think the realities are different. Like just now when Hassan Iqbal Sahib has been saying that they're going to start having political dialogue within these areas. He knows very well that historically this has never happened. The PML had been had in the government twice, and so has been PPP twice in the government in the 90s. This process was never started. The historically political parties have never been allowed to operate in these areas. Of course, all right, if it's a new initiative, let's see how it happens. But this is something that we have stopped from happening, nothing that President Musharraf hasn't started. But if this is the dialogue that we are talking about, of course, let's see what happens. But we did have a dialogue.
Mr.
As I
Tariq Azim, may I remind you, in 97, we had
briefly.
adult franchise introduced in the tribal areas.
All right, I'm afraid there is plenty for us to argue about, but we are out of time. We'll have to thank our guests, Ahsan Iqbal, the PMLN spokesman, Maria Kusisto, analyst from the Eurasia Group, and Tariq Azim Khan, former Minister of Information of Pakistan. Thank you for being with us. And thank you for joining us here, the viewer, on this edition of Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments and suggestions. Feel free to email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. For now, it's goodbye.